For today's video, I want to share my experiences with some of the most popular algae scrapers in the aquarium hobby and explain why I keep going back to one option that many people overlook. In case you're short on time, I honestly think that the best algae scraper in the hobby is actually one of the simplest and cheapest options, and it's a basic pot scourer. But there's several reasons why I believe these are the best options, so for today's video I'll walk you through all of the algae scraper types I've tried, ranking them from the best to the worst at removing algae from your aquarium glass. First up is an aquascaped spatula, but technically this isn't designed to remove algae, it's designed to move substrate around in your aquarium. Still, I've had a few people in the comments mention that they use these to scrape algae, and I've even found some Amazon reviews saying the same. Now this is a budget-friendly option since aquascaped spatulas usually come included with most basic aquascaping tool sets, so it can easily be used to keep your costs down. I did give this a try myself, and in all honesty I really wasn't impressed with it, so it is an absolute last resort as far as I'm concerned. This is because it's not designed for that job. The edge of it isn't sharp or angled enough, so you have to apply a lot more pressure than you'd expect to get a good job on cleaning the algae. And with cheaper aquascaping sets, I'm confident that these little handles really can't take that much pressure, so I wouldn't trust trying to get rid of calcium deposits or anything like that with it either. It does offer decent coverage for the middle of your glass panes, but it does take a lot more effort than it really should. It really struggles with the corners of the aquarium as well, especially when it gets close to the silicone, and I was just too nervous to use it with any real speed. So after one attempt I quickly went back to my regular algae scrapers as they are just far easier and faster. Next up are these plastic razor algae scrapers, and to be honest I'm really not a fan of these. I originally decided to give them a try because of an issue I had with the standard metal razor scrapers that I'll talk about later in the video. In theory these should work, but the problem I had is that the plastic blades just aren't moulded well enough and they're a nightmare to use. Now it can be used as an algae scraper and it will get the algae off your tank glass, but again it just takes far more effort and time than it needs to do such a simple job. You do get decent coverage for the centre of your glass panes, and the plastic blade makes them a little bit safer to use around the silicone in the corners too. But like I said, it just seems to miss parts of the algae, so you have to keep going over it again and again, and in all honesty I do think there's potential here if they can fix the moulding issue with the blades and make them a lot sharper and pointier. But as it stands with the current design, I stopped using these very quickly and moved on to other options. Next up is the API Algae Scraper, and at first I honestly thought this would be an excellent option as it's basically a standard scourer pad on the end of a stick. It does get the job done, especially in my 40 gallon and 29 gallon tanks where the larger head of the scraper makes it a lot easier to get large amounts of algae off the glass quickly. However, that same large size does become a hassle in smaller nano tanks, and it really does start to slow things down when you need to be careful with where you put the scraper. The corner coverage is also very hit and miss no matter what tank size you're using, and overall, general use can be a pain at times as it does miss areas. I think that this is because the scourer material on the end actually makes it more difficult to tell how much pressure you're actually applying to the glass, which means you miss algae what other scrapers would have got the first time. So while this one does work, especially for larger tanks, I do think there's better options out there for small and medium setups. Next up is the simple toothbrush, and I'm not talking about the fancy expensive kind you use for your teeth. I'm literally talking about the cheapest ones you can find, where you get a lot of them for a couple of pounds or a couple of dollars, with the very tough bristles that hurt your gums if you try to use them. Due to the very small head, their coverage is pretty much useless for the centre of your glass panes in medium to large tanks, but they can be surprisingly effective with small nano tanks and jarariums. Even with a small nano tank, the main advantage of a toothbrush is getting into the corner areas directly over your silicone and removing the algae from there. On top of that, you can also use these for any delicate work where you have stubborn algae growth on your hardscape to help remove it too. But while I do use toothbrushes on a regular basis, it is always as a supplementary method specifically for use in the corners of the tanks, and I'll use something else for the larger surface area in the centre of the glass. Next up are these metal razor scrapers, and in all honesty I do really like these, at least for the most part. These are very affordable and they come with plenty of spare blades that you can switch out as needed, and on top of that, the sharp edge makes removing algae and other buildups like calcium deposits very quick and easy. In my experience, these cut through most types of algae with minimal effort, especially on the centre glass pane. That said, the sharp blade definitely requires a steady hand, especially when you're using it near the silicone seals of your tank. I've personally found that pairing these with the toothbrushes that I covered earlier is one of the best options you can get, and it covers both areas with ease and it lets you get the job done quickly. Now, as much as I like using these metal razor algae scrapers, the main reason I stopped using them is because I ended up scratching 2 of my aquariums when using them, even when I was being careful. So while I do like these scrapers, just be aware that they can damage your glass if you're not extremely cautious and take it slow. Next up are these magnetic scrapers, and these work by placing one part of the tool inside the tank and the other outside, with the strong magnets that are built into them keeping the two connected through the glass. This allows you to move the handle on the outside of your tank while the scraper inside moves in sync with the handle and lets you direct where you need to clean on the glass. One advantage of this system is that you can use it to cover wide areas quickly without getting your hands wet. The scrubbing surface on this particular model is like a Velcro material, which does a great job of removing all algae types I've tried it on, as well as calcium buildup. They offer decent coverage for the central areas of your glass panes too, and I can do the front panel on my 40-gallon tank in under a minute with ease. The downside is that these are close to useless for the corners and silicone sealings because the magnet just doesn't line up correctly and the inside part of the scraper starts to flip around. But I do think that the overall convenience far outweighs that one drawback of this particular algae scraper. So, just like with the razor scraper I touched on earlier in the video, I usually use these in conjunction with some cheap toothbrushes to handle the corner and silicone to keep the algae under control. Some models of these do come with built-in razor blades, but personally I just prefer these standard Velcro ones, which tend to be cheaper. They still get the job done and there's no risk of them scratching the glass with the razor. So if you're looking for an algae scraper that's specifically designed to remove algae from your tank glass, then this really is an excellent option and it would probably be my top recommendation. But, like I mentioned at the start of the video, I do think there's an even better option which is even cheaper and not specifically designed for this job, and it's one of these simple scourer pads that you would use to clean your pots and pans. Just be sure to get the regular plain ones because some of these do come with soap or other cleaning chemicals infused into them, which you definitely don't want in your tank. But these are very cheap and very easy to use, and for large tanks I often just use a full pad or maybe a half pad to get quick and easy wide coverage to get the algae scraped off the glass. For my medium-sized tanks I can cut these down even more to do the same job in the same amount of time and keep costs lower because I'll be using less sponge per clean. Then when it comes to small nano tanks, I literally just cut these into tiny little chunks and it does the job very quickly with ease. Another benefit of these tiny little chunks that I usually use with my nano tanks is that they are perfect for getting into the corners and the silicone on my larger tanks to do the job there with a single option. So if you are going to be using these scourer pads, you don't need the toothbrush options that I covered earlier. This single tool can get the full job done for you. The only downside that I can actually think of when using these as your algae scraper of choice is that you do have to put your hand inside of the tank to use them. Now you could do a partial water change and then scrape your glass while the water level is low if you really want, but it doesn't really bother me if my hand gets wet. But I honestly see this being a hand-powered option as an advantage because it gives you more control over the amount of pressure you're applying to certain areas, so you can adjust for stubborn algae compared to soft and easy to remove algae as needed. So that's all the different types of Algae Scraper that I've personally tested, and honestly I just keep going back to the scourer pads because they are so quick and easy and cheap. I do still like the magnetic scrapers and I do use them from time to time, especially on my larger tanks, but both options work well and it depends on your personal preferences. Anyway guys, that brings the video to an end. I hope it's been helpful. Thanks for watching and good luck with scraping the algae off your tank glass.